It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We're going to cover a number of issues present in the news today. Tomorrow, as you're well aware, is Thanksgiving, and we're going to make sure that we're, I'll be off. So for those of you that normally listen tomorrow, or, our regular listeners, I will not be here tomorrow. I'm going to take the day and spend it with my family. And so if you are a loyal listener, please forgive me, but that is a requirement. So for the record, we're going to cover a few different topics this morning. We're going to talk about the Iranian nuke deal and what a farce it is, because apparently somebody's lying here. I mean, you've got Iran coming out and saying that what we're being told by the White House is not true, that they do, in fact, have the entitled right to continue to enable or allow the development of nuclear material, and that they have the right to enrich uranium as an entitlement going forward. The White House says that's not true. Well, somebody's lying. And I don't know about you guys, but with the track record of this White House, I'll bet it's not the Iranians. So we're going to discuss that a little bit, because I find that disturbing, to say the least, that we are looking here at our own government misrepresenting the terms of an agreement, which, quite frankly, is an important agreement, because word out on the street right now is that the Iranians are working hand in hand with the North Koreans to develop intercontinental ballistic capabilities. Now, of course, that should disturb anyone, but the date that they expect them to be available is even more disturbing, and that would be 2015. So if they are, in fact, developing the ability to launch nuclear weapons intercontinentally that would reach the United States by 2015, what the heck is the administration doing cutting a deal that allows them to continue to enrich? Our second topic is going to be the EPA. Now, for those of you who don't know, the EPA has come out with a boatload of brand new regulations, and they are right now being criticized, but the reason is not that they're coming out with 6,000 new regs, which, I defy anybody to understand what that means and how you're supposed to follow them all. But they also say that these new regulations are based upon scientific criteria and data that justify their positioning, and yet they won't release it. So we're just supposed to take their word for it, right? Yeah, right. No thanks. The EPA is probably one of the most corrupt organizations out there. They are an extra-constitutional agency, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we hit that topic. Our third segment is going to be the Obamacare secret bailout you did not know about. The secret bailout is related to insurers who are, for all intents and purposes, in the president's, quote, fix of the you can keep your plan if you like it nonsense. There is a loophole in there that forces the taxpayers to cover the losses of insurers. Bet you didn't know that. Marco Rubio is breaking the news on that. And he is, I believe, submitting some legislation to block that action from occurring, because we don't know how big that loss could be. It could be in the billions, it could be in the hundreds of billions, it could be in the trillions. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last. The website's supposed to be available by the end of the week. Everybody's out there saying it's not going to be. And so we really don't know what kind of an unlimited blank check this might actually be. Not to mention the fact that there's a whole argument to be made for the fact that the president doesn't have the right legally to go out there and unilaterally start changing law just because he wants to cover his bippy. I can say bippy on the radio, can't I? I think I can. I think I can. Our fourth topic is going to be an important one this morning, and I want you to be aware of what's happening here. You know, I live in Missouri, and the Ozark Scenic Riverways, or National Scenic Riverways, was a takeover of some state-owned property that surrounded these major rivers that are here in our area, and they're very highly sought after for recreational use. A lot of people canoe down them, and they fish on them, and so forth. They ride horses in the area. They do allow motorboats on there, and so forth. And years ago, the national parks took over the rivers and basically took them over from the state, and then via eminent domain, they kicked everybody out for like a quarter mile on either side of the river, essentially, and they've turned it into this, natural wilderness area. The problem is that the National Park Service is now planning on instituting new rules, which will have some pretty draconian consequences on the folks in the area who live on or near that river. And there's another move afoot, and I'm going to talk to you about it a little bit, but basically what we're looking to do is to get that property turned back over from the National Park Service back over to the state. In other words, here's an opportunity for us to do something unique. What's that, you ask? Well, let me tell you. Funny that you should ask. We're going to go on the offensive. We're going to stop sitting here and trying to play defense all the time, and we're going to go on offense. And we're going to demand that the land be turned back over to the state, to our state conservation department. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is an important issue for you to follow, and I'll tell you why it is. One, if we're successful, and I believe we will be, then, and I have reason to believe we will be, by the way. I'm not just pulling that out of my ear. But once we are successful, it may well lay some groundwork for other organizations and groups who have these onerous, National Park Service properties that they would like to get taken back to their state as well. One, it gets rid of, a real pesky nanny. Two, it gives you an opportunity to take control over your own destiny in your own local parks. And three, it's just good to give government a black eye every once in a while. Did I actually say that? Yes, I did, and I don't care. I'm fighting mad about this thing, and you should be too, and you'll understand why when you hear it. Even if you're not local to this area, even if you've never visited any of these rivers, it doesn't matter. This is an important issue for you to be aware of, because this is also part of the overall Blueways, which we defeated them on, and now they're back in 100 other directions. So, it's kind of like, you kill off one rat, and then 100 other rats come pouring out of other directions, and you just, it's like whack-a-mole, right? The minute you hit it over the head, it pops up somewhere else. So, all right, let's get into our first topic on the Somebodies Lyin deal, because somebody here is clearly lying. Iranian officials are saying that the White House is misleading the public about the details on this nuclear agreement that they cut. Now, John Kerry, who I don't like at all, I look at that guy, and every time I see him, my skin crawls. He reminds me of Herman Munster a little bit, in a suit, or a better suit than Herman wore, and the sleeves fit. But what really bothers me about Kerry is he is a lifelong tick. He's the kind of guy that for his entire life, he has been living on the blood and the sweat and the labor and the effort of Americans. He is a useless, empty suit. And yet, for all intents and purposes, the guy holds so much power, and he is diametrically opposed to most things that most constitutional conservative Americans and patriots are for. He is a big government animal. He loves it. He can't make it big enough. He's married to one of the wealthiest women in the world. She's the heir of the Heinz ketchup fortune. They have untold money. The guy has been caught doing stupid stuff, like buying a boat and then housing it in another state so he could avoid sales tax in the state in which he lived. I mean, so what's good for you peons is not, and peasants is not good for me, Mr. Kerry, right? I can buy a yacht that costs millions upon millions of dollars, which I'll probably only visit maybe once a season. But I don't want to have to pay tax like the rest of you peons, so I'm going to move it to another state where there's no tax so that they can't whack me for it. I mean, come on, man. How cheesy and crappy can you be? He's one of the wealthiest people in the House, in the Senate. Or he was, but when he was in the Senate. He's one of the wealthiest people in the halls of government. The guy is a shameless... Anyway. All right. Here's the problem. The Iranian officials are telling us flat out that the White House is lying to us about the details on this nuclear agreement. And the reason that they're saying that, and by the way, for those of you who are listening to me who also do a radio program or a television cast, and those of you who don't, I hate when people say nuclear. I know, that's a small thing. It's not nuclear. It's nuclear. Even George Bush and Sarah Palin say nuclear. It drives me nuts. I've heard Obama say it too. But he doesn't say axe. Now, the problem here is that the disagreement comes, this is a 4-page agreement. 4 pages. I mean, it's not like, War and Peace. Well, maybe it is like War and Peace, but not like the novel War and Peace. The Kerry team is saying, and Obama is saying, hey, this blocks Iran from their nuclear ambitions, if only for a 6-month window. That's the term of the agreement. It lasts for 6 months. And after that, they come back and they're supposed to have this new, even more strenuous agreement, which, of course, is an absurdity on its face. In other words, why would you, let's just analyze that for a moment. The president has come back and said, in 6 months, we're going to negotiate an even more stringent agreement. Really? Okay, so let me just get this right. You're going to free up a bunch of seized and frozen assets to the tune of $8 billion. You're going to allow them to sell gold and silver that they've been trying to move on the market but can't because of these international limitations. And you're going to allow them to sell oil on the open marketplace, which, again, was part of the embargo issues. And after you've done all of that, and you've allowed them to make all kinds of political hay on this, then you're going to institute even a more stringent arrangement than you have now, 6 months from now. Okay, I get that negotiation skill. Not. I mean, you got to be kidding me. When you... The absurdity of that is actually laughable. Anyway, the White House, on this 4-page document, is saying that Iran does not have a right to enrich uranium going forward during this 6-month period. And it is the key component of this entire agreement. However, Iran says, wait right there. We do have the right to enrich uranium, and it's an entitlement that allows us to join the nuclear community. Notice I said nuclear community, not nuclear. And that the agreement not only says that they can enrich uranium, but that it's fully recognized in the draft that's been released to, for them to do their final approval on. Now, the Iranian foreign minister comes out and says on Tuesday he's rejecting the White House's version of this as invalid, and he's accusing Washington of releasing it as factually inaccurate in an attempt to mislead the American public. Ooh, where have we heard that before? Oh, that's right, Obamacare. Oh, that's right, Benghazi. Oh, that's right, the IRS. Oh, that... I can keep going. So, what he's at... And here's his quote. This is the foreign ministry spokeswoman, for the Iranian press. What has been released by the website of the White House as a fact sheet is a one-sided interpretation of the agreed text in Geneva, and some of the explanations and words in the sheet contradict the text of the Joint Plan of Action. And this fact sheet has unfortunately been translated and released in the name of the Geneva Agreement by certain media, which is not true. Now, I'll ignore the fact that the foreign ministry spokeswoman doesn't have the best grasp of English, but okay. She's saying that officials in Iran and in the White House, or I should say that officials in the White House have modified key details of the deal and released their own version, which is inconsistent with the actual terms of the agreement. Here's what they say. This comprehensive solution would enable Iran to fully enjoy its right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes under the relevant articles of the NPT, that's the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in conformity, with its obligations therein. That's what the agreement reads, according to the copy that was released to the Iranian state-run media. Quote, this comprehensive solution would involve a mutually defined enrichment program. There's the key phrase, a mutually defined enrichment program, with practical limits and transparency measures to ensure the peaceful nature of the program. This comprehensive solution would constitute an integrated whole where nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. In other words, it's an all or nothing deal, right? If there's any aspect or portion of this agreement that we can't agree on, the whole agreement is null and void. Iran's objection, of course, to the deal as presented in the fact sheet raises some pretty serious issues about these final talks that are supposed to occur, not only now, but 6 months from now. In fact, there may not be a discussion 6 months from now if this thing doesn't get straightened out soon. Now, the White House did confirm, and by the way, this article's out of the Free Beacon, and so they're speaking in the first person. The White House confirmed to the Washington Free Beacon on Monday that the final details of the plan have yet to be worked out, meaning that Iran is not yet beholden to the 6-month freeze on its nuclear activities. Technical details to implement the Joint Plan of Action must be finalized before the terms of the plan begin, said a senior official at the White House. The P5-1 and Iran are working on what that time frame is. P5-1 is the countries that are negotiating this on behalf of the planet, right? It's Germany, United States, Britain, whatever, Russia. The White House would not provide any additional details on the time frame. Now, the problem here is that, one, the agreement actually hasn't started to run, even though Obama's taking credit for it as if it is. Two, he's misleading us as to the terms of the agreement because it clearly states that they have the opportunity and the ability legally to continue to enrich uranium. Now, if you've got the wherewithal and the ability to enrich uranium, you've got the ability and the wherewithal to make a weapon. And I don't care about the percentages. It's 5% could be enriched to only 20%, but you need 90% to make a bomb. And all. You know what? Let me tell you something. First of all, I don't trust the Iranians any more than I trust the Obama administration, and I don't trust them at all. The Iranians are, by the way, for the record, while this agreement was being negotiated over the last couple of months, and by the way, we also know that for the last year, the administration has been conducting negotiations with them in secret that even the press has withheld from us. Yes, the press withheld the details and the fact that we have been holding secret discussions with the Iranians for over the last year. So this has been going on for quite some time. And while all of this has been going on, the Iranians have been sending people over to work with North Korea on the development of a new intercontinental capable ballistic missile. Multi-stage. Yeah. And they expect that missile to be ready for delivery by 2015. That is a scant 2 years away, folks. In fact, Obama will be in office when that missile gets delivered. So exactly what is it that this agreement states then? I mean, the problem here is a guy who's a executive director for Christians United for Israel. And I don't want to get into the whole question of what is Israel's pressure being applied to the United States to defend them from Iran. I don't want to hear, that the whole media is run by the Jews. And I get all your emails. And listen, I don't agree with it. I do say that the Jewish people have an unbalanced level of influence in our Congress. There's no denying that. But I don't believe that they're the ones who are the secret Illuminati running the world. So for those of you who continuously send me that stuff, you can stop anytime you want. But this guy from the CUFI, David Borg, his statement is that he fears that the White House may have been, quote, played by the Iranians. Well, no kidding. I mean, I wouldn't let President Barack Obama nor John Kerry negotiate a used car deal for me. This may prove to be yet another worrisome sign that the Obama administration was played by the Iranians. Their concessions were either illusory or meaningless, while ours will resuscitate the Iranian economy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, points to what I said earlier, where, excuse me, I should hit the mute button when that happens. This points to the earlier statement I said, which is that, or the point that I made, that, Obama's trying to sit here and telling us that 6 months from now, we're gonna create an even more draconian agreement limiting the Iranians. Well, the truth of the matter is, this will release up to $7 billion. Actually, I've heard figures of as high as $8 billion that have been held over and frozen in international accounts as a result of the embargo. And it will also agree to suspend certain sanctions on gold and precious metals sales, Iran's auto sector, and their petrochemical exports, which will provide them with another rough $1.5 billion in revenue. And then they can earn, in addition to all of that, another $4.25 billion in oil revenue under the deal. And it will release $400 million in governmental tuition assistance that can be transferred to international universities for the benefit of Iranian students who were going to college there. Now, whether that money actually makes it there is a whole nother question. But the problem that we have here is that somebody's lying. And with the track record of this administration and what we now know to be the truth about Benghazi, the IRS scandal, with Fast and Furious, and with the latest Obamacare scandal, not to mention a host of other issues, I got to tell you, I don't believe that the Iranians are the ones who are lying. Now, you can disagree with me if you want, but Iranians are collaborating with North Korea on a rocket booster that really already undermines the deal that they've made in reference to this agreement. Mike Rogers, he's the guy from Alabama. He's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. And he says, quote, while the president was undertaking his secret negotiations, this is over the course of the past year, which Congress wasn't informed of, he had to know Iran and North Korea were testing new engines for ballistic missiles to target the United States. Every day, the president's deal looks worse and worse, he says. Ted Cruz has also come out and thrown it under the bus. That you can expect. But the problem here is, and this is Cruz's input on it. I'll give it to you anyway because I think it's important. This is also a Free Beacon article, by the way. The Iranian regime is clearly demonstrating through word and deed that they have no intention of moderating the behavior that earned them one of the harshest international programs of economic sanctions on record. Relaxing the sanctions now only encourages them to continue their pursuit of nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to Israel, Europe, and even the United States. I hope President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry will consider or reconsider this dangerous policy and add the immediate cessation of their ICBM program to the list of prerequisites that are placed on Iran before any additional negotiations take place. And I got to tell you, it's not only the conservatives that are out there saying that. The problem that we have is that while we're sitting here negotiating with the Iranians, and this is the same game we played with North Korea, and ultimately they ended up with what? We now know they have nuclear weapons. In fact, they've detonated them, so there's no doubt. This is the same exact game we played with North Korea for 20 years. And in the end, they have the nuclear weapons. Iran's been playing us like this for the last 10, and in the end, they're going to get them. In fact, George Will came on, and I saw him on Fox the other day, and he said, and sometimes Will is kind of flaky. Sometimes I like what he says, and sometimes I don't. But he made a very clear statement that I thought was worthy of mention here at this point, and then we're going to take a break. I suspect that it's time we get used to the idea that Iran is a nuclear power. Boom. With all due respect, these countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel, who are up in arms about Iran having nuclear power or nuclear weapons, have a right to be upset. They're within the immediate backpack nuke zone. Drive a truck across the border in Kaflooey. And I don't think that they trust this president any more than you or I. And we've got ample evidence as to why, of recent days, we shouldn't be. The NSA scandal. Need I go through them again? NSA, IRS. By the way, last night, O'Reilly did a hit piece on this thing about the IRS scandal. You know, a year later, the companies that all filed for the 501c4 and C3 tax exemptions, a full year later, 6 months later, not a single one of them, has been interviewed by the Department of Justice over the alleged investigation. Well, how do you conduct an investigation without talking to the victim? You don't. That's the point. All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I'm the host here. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the EPA, the new regulations they're coming out with, and how they are perhaps the most un-extra-constitutional agency in existence. They have run completely, totally amok. They are implementing Agenda 21 without congressional review, without popular support. I mean, this is just completely out of control. Somebody has got to rein in this EPA. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick with us.